Let's all just take a moment to appreciate one of the most vilified groups of people in the United States, if not the world: politicians. There are so many harmful stereotypes about politicians. Public sentiment, public trust of politicians is always incredibly low. And one of the reasons is that people have this ridiculous idea that once politicians get into office, take legislators, for example, you elect someone to represent you in your state legislature or Congress, and there's this idea that people have that once they get into office, these legislators, these representatives of the people, they care less about actually solving the problems or representing the interests of their constituents, and they're more just about feathering their own nests or pursuing their own personal agendas or grinding their own personal axes and generally just wasting time and wasting public money doing things that really don't amount to anything and don't help anyone in their district or in the country. Well, I say that is definitely not true, and here is a Newsweek article to prove it. Headline: Florida passes bill to ban weather modification. See, now, who isn't worried about that? Is that not a pertinent issue that affects the lives of millions of real Americans? Aren't we all scared to death about weather modification, and aren't we all just a little bit more secure in ourselves knowing that members of the Florida House have passed a law to ban weather modification? Again, this is from Newsweek. The article is by James Bickerton. Quote, Florida's House passed a bill to ban weather modification and geoengineering on Wednesday. Why it matters? A number of conservative commentators have expressed concern over geoengineering plans. Last week, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, a Republican from Georgia, described an experiment backed by the British government that seeks to reflect solar radiation to cool Earth as, quote, absolute insanity. Since the 1990s, some activists have promoted discredited theories that the white lines of condensed water vapor that follow jet aircraft are chemical toxins used to help the government control people and or the weather. Well, one thing at a time, all right? One thing at a time. This Florida bill is going to take care of the controlling of the weather. Eventually, they'll get around to banning using geoengineering and weather modification to control people. You have to take it one step at a time. You don't want it to be one of these huge like omnibus bills that's thousands and thousands of pages that nobody's even going to read. You want to keep it focused and keep it simple. So let's just ban weather modification first, and then we'll get around to banning the use of chemtrails to control people's minds, okay? The legislation, SB 56, would make unapproved cloud seeding and other similar activities a third-degree felony, punishable by up to 5 years in prison or significantly raised fines of up to $100,000. Well, that'll stop the Illuminati. I mean, that's who's supposedly behind this, right? That's where all these conspiracy theories about, the contrails behind aircraft, they're actually chemtrails that are influencing people's behavior or changing the weather or exerting some kind of nefarious invisible control over the environment or the population. It's always some shadowy overlords doing it, right? It's the Illuminati. It's the Council on Foreign Relations. It's the 13 bloodlines. It's the Jews with their space lasers. It's always one of those. But now that they've raised the fines and made it a third-degree felony in Florida, I'm sure that that'll take care of the problem completely. The bill says the injection, release, or dispersion by any means of a chemical compound, a substance, or an apparatus into the atmosphere within the borders of this state for the express purpose of affecting the temperature, weather, climate, or intensity of sunlight is prohibited. It also instructs the Florida Department of Environmental Protection to investigate alleged cases of wrongdoing, which can be passed on to other state agencies if deemed necessary. There's a Florida Department of Environmental Protection? How long have the Republicans been in control of that state, and there's still a state EPA? Come on, fellas! What's the holdup? Democratic State Representative Anna Eskamani condemned the bill, saying it was feeding into conspiracy theories, Florida Politics reported. You don't say conspiracy theories. Democratic State Representative Ashley Gant said, quote, "There's a phrase that I keep hearing lately, go outside and touch some grass. This bill is crazy to me." Yeah, sure, go outside and touch some grass, like maybe some grass that's been polluted by an Illuminati chemtrail. Nice try, Representative Gant, if that is your real name. Responding to the bill's critics, Republican State Representative Kevin Steele said, "The last time we had to listen to the science, we wore masks for 9 months. And then a bunch of you stopped wearing them, and to date, 1.2 million Americans have died of COVID-19. But your problem isn't that. Your problem is we had to wear masks for 9 months, which I know most of you motherfuckers weren't wearing masks for 9 months after the COVID outbreak. You could barely stand to have masks on a month into it. Do you not remember the COVID-19 outbreak really became a problem, really became a public health crisis in the United States in March of 2020? They wanted to have it maskless and have the quarantine and all of the social distancing stuff over with in time for Easter that year. Am I the only one who remembers this? Hospitals were overwhelmed. People were sick. People were dying. The country had ground to a halt. People, except for first responders and essential workers, were told to stay home if at all possible. You couldn't go to the grocery store unless you practiced social distancing and you stayed 10 feet away from every other person in all directions. And they were saying, we need to get this over with so people can have Easter, like in a month. So do not tell me that a full 9 months into it, that a bunch of you motherfuckers that were complaining about it after a couple of weeks were still wearing masks. What happened was, a bunch of you took your masks off right away, not always in public, sometimes in private. You had little parties at your houses, or you went to gatherings, right? And you ignored social distancing because you thought that even the rules of germ theory didn't apply to you. And the pandemic got worse and worse and worse and had so many ups and downs and so many spikes over the next couple of years that 1.2 million people in this country alone died from it. And you have the gall to complain about wearing masks for the first 9 months, and then you point to that as though that's some kind of horror story. Look what happened the last time we listened to the science. We had to wear masks. Not, look what happened the last time we ignored the science and over 1 million Americans died. That's not what you're concerned about. That's not what haunts you. We had to wear masks for 9 months. Can you imagine? Do you remember how terrible that was? We had to wear masks. You know, I used to think that one of the biggest holes in all of these global domination conspiracy theories was just the fact that the shadowy overlords seem to be taking so damn long to implement their evil plan. You know, Glenn Beck was warning people 15, 20 years ago, they're going to herd us into camps. They're going to herd us all into FEMA camps. They've been saying for 50 years, oh, chemtrails, they're poisoning the atmosphere. They're controlling our minds. The fluoride, the chemtrails, the power lines, the whatever, the 5G, right? Wi-Fi is going to kill us or brainwash us or whatever. And nothing ever actually happens. The evil overlords, the puppet masters, they never actually start pulling the strings. They never actually implement their evil takeover, right? Nobody ever declares martial law. Nobody ever rounds up people. Well, I mean, they kind of are rounding up people now, aren't they? But nobody ever rounds up people like this, the people who are raising the alarm about the conspiracy theory. That never happens. And that was always the biggest hole for me in all of these theories. Well, if all of this is true and these people are real and they have these terrible, they're plotting to turn the United States into a police state and we're all going to be enslaved, and we're all going to be living in camps, and we're all going to be, working 20 hours a day for our masters in the Illuminati. Why haven't they done it yet? Why have they just been a few years away from doing it for the last several decades? Why haven't they done it yet? But then I read stories like this, and I start to wonder if that's as big of a hole in the conspiracy as I used to think it was. Because look at the people who are opposed to these supposed conspirators. If you were one of these people who was using weather modification through chemtrails to change the weather or to control people's minds, if you were someone who was trying to brainwash the population or was preparing to round up millions of people and enslave them, or do whatever Glenn Beck was ranting about back then, or do whatever Alex Jones is ranting about, if you were one of the Illuminati and you were planning to do all of these things, and then you saw that your enemies were people like Kevin Steele and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump, wouldn't you take your time too? I mean, what's the rush?